Hello, folks. Good afternoon, and welcome to Recovery Live. C4 Innovations is once again thrilled to bring you another Recovery Live event. And if you've attended previous events with us, you know that we always try to bring top tier speakers and interesting and challenging issues. And then we try to get some creative strategies that help peers and non peers alike in really improving the lives of others, including all of the folks that we serve. And Recovery Live events also try to identify and elevate the voices of individuals that might not immediately be recognized in a sort of a national sense, but actually, these voices are perhaps the best suited to identify the challenges and the barriers that they've been encountering, as well as some successful strategies that they've used to support our brothers and sisters with behavioral health challenges every day. And this often unheard but really critically important voice was one of the primary reasons we started Recovery Live several years ago. And we'll continue with this tradition moving forward because we know that what is happening at the street level can evolve and it can adapt and it can change really in the blink of an eye. So when you hear from those who can alert us to trends and new challenges, it really allows us to sort of get ahead of the game and of the issues and be honestly proactive rather than reactive, which is really a good position to be in. Bina, can you take me to slide 3, please? So at C4 Innovations, or C4 for short, we're committed to advancing recovery, wellness, and housing stability for people who are marginalized. And we're committed to reducing disparities and achieving equitable outcomes. We engage, support, and partner with service organizations, with communities, systems, and we do that to develop and implement research-based and evidence-based solutions that are always person-centered, recovery-oriented, and trauma-informed. You can learn a lot more about the work C4 does simply by visiting our website at c4innovates.com. And if you're so inclined, please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. There's a lot of information there as well. Next slide, please. Today's Recovery Live events are just like all those in the past. They're very interactive, and you engage directly with the presenters and each other through the live chat box. Our speakers are going to share some of their initial thoughts, and then as we move along, they'll answer your questions that you raised during this event. And that's why it's so important that we have your participation. So the audience is in a listen-only mode, but you can introduce yourself, pose questions, share ideas, and that's strongly encouraged, and resource links. You can let us know if you've got tech difficulties, just simply type them into the chat box. And if you want to send a private message to the host, please be sure that you've used the drop-down arrow and you select all panelists in order to get your message directly to them. We want you all to participate in the chat to the extent that you feel comfortable. So to do that, you just need to kind of make sure that if you're doing it, you select the hosts and attendees option. And I think that's the default setting anyway, but that gets the message out to everybody in the event. To access chat, click the word chat on your screen and the chat box is going to pop out. You can resize it, click and drag it to the side, wherever you need to, but you can move it out of the way of the other content on the screen. Slide 5, please. And today's event is going to last about 1 hour. It's being recorded. We're going to share that link with all the folks who registered for this event, whether you're here or not. It will also be available on the C4 YouTube channel listed on the slide. And if, as you are listening to this content, you feel like your organization might need some technical assistance around this, or really any other topic related to recovery, behavioral health, peer support, etc., just email us at training@c4innovates.com. And we'll be happy to discuss the needs. We'll brainstorm some strategies and potential solutions, and we'll really work together with you to determine the best technical assistance available to meet your needs. All right, let me bring us all back to the reason we're here today. Because once again, we are just incredibly fortunate to have 3 speakers that are on your screen today. And those folks are going to be talking about supporting recovery for individuals who were incarcerated. And what's important to understand today is that these speakers have both professional and lived experience with this topic. And today's discussion should really help everybody obtain a deeper understanding of the challenges that are facing incarcerated individuals who are seeking recovery as well as the strategies and efforts that are proposed or underway to enhance and improve both the forensic piece and the reentry piece of peer support. And this is also around non-peer supports too. So there's something in this for everybody. And because of that, I'm just so pleased to introduce our speakers today. First, we're going to hear from Emil Karan. Emil is a justice-involved individual. He's a drug court graduate in recovery and graduated from drug court in Florida. And one of the things that Emil was able to do was advocate in a really honest and humble way and a successful way. And he became one of the very first persons in that court to obtain medication-assisted treatment for his opioid use disorder. And as a result of that, his life in recovery is actually on track to realize SAMHSA's definition of recovery, this vastly improved health and wellness, and a chance to live a self-directed life with the ability to strive for and ultimately reach his full potential. So we're really happy to have Emil here with us today. Brandy Izzicardo, who is the executive director of the SAFE Project. And folks, Randy is one of the fiercest criminal justice reform advocates I have ever had the pleasure of working alongside. So it is thrilling to have Randy here. And finally, but certainly not least, Daryl Mcgraw joins us. Daryl's got enough letters after his name, I can't even fit him on my page. But the most important thing about Daryl, he is a recovery specialist, works with C4 Innovations, but he also has his fingers in so many other criminal justice reform pies. It's again, it'd take me the rest of the hour to even list them. So just suffice it to say, the expertise and experience we have in this group right now with Emil, Brandy, and Daryl around this particular topic, team, frankly, it's unparalleled. And I think this is going to be a very important discussion today. So on to what everybody's here for. I'm going to get us started. And I'm going to pose an opening question to Emil to get us started. And here's the question, Emil, that is coming your way. If you could share just one important issue, perspective, opinion, or thought that you absolutely need everybody out there listening to hear, what would that one thing be?
Hey, Steve, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. And thank you, Brandy and Daryl, for just being a great example of what ongoing recovery looks like. For people in my position, to see how far you guys have gone is really is inspirational. And I'm excited and nervous, just so you guys know. I'm a little bit nervous, but not about, I just want to really try and get my message across clearly. So thank you guys for being here. I see so many of my friends as well in the chat. Thank you guys for showing up. Yeah, so basically a little bit of background about me before I answer Steve's question. I, like so many people in recovery, I was abused as a child. I was also in the military and I suffered something called MST, which isn't widely known because of stigma and shame, but it's military sexual trauma. And so, via that and PTSD, I've been, actively using drugs for most of my adult life until I've been 2 years free of substances in March. So, it's just a blessing to be able to sit here today and be in recovery and be able to share some message with the people that have helped me along the way. What I would want to say is, to all the people that helped me and that are here listening, there's a few things that happen along the way in this process that I feel like, need to be heard so that other people don't have to go through the same cycles that I went through, and my experience was, of course, a life with drug use involved crime and I was repeated, in and out of the justice system. And my experience is I would go to court, get probation, violate probation, go to jail, get out of jail, and do the whole cycle over again. and this is repeated multiple times throughout my, my history. And what I really feel like this time made so much difference. For one, I entered into the drug court program through the grace of the court system. Not so many other people were able to do that, as I've seen, the opportunities afforded to me aren't afforded to everyone because of the point system and the courts and, other inequities that exist. But, through this process, I started, and I wish I could say it was easy for me right away to get, free of all substances, but as most people know, who suffer from an opioid addiction, like I could get about 2 weeks free of all substances. I put down everything but the opiates, but I couldn't get past the 2 week mark before I would, relapse and again. And here I am again, facing this cycle of going back to jail, sitting in jail, getting out, relapse, go 2 weeks, relapse again, and having to restart this whole process of, housing and everything over again after facing incarceration. And through finally, I was ordered to go to residential treatment, which, I feel like I should have went to residential treatment from the beginning, but I was always just too afraid to say that I needed that help. And, the judge saw that I needed to go. She said, if you fail another urinalysis, you're going to residential treatment. So I was already locked into the cycle of using, and unknown to them, I was using under the radar and passing UAs, virtually the whole time I was in this process. So I failed another urinalysis, and they told me, turn yourself in. You're going to go to residential treatment. We're going to take you into custody until you can get a bed, and then you'll go to residential. So, of course, once you're locked into a cycle of addiction and using, like, I couldn't bring myself to turn myself in, and it wasn't because of I was afraid of jail. I had done jail so many times. It was just second nature to me to go back to the behind the walls. But so I ran, and this process of running nearly took my life. I honestly believe that the day I got picked up was the day before I died, because I was showing my mugshot just the other day to some friends, and it's just terrible, the place I was at. And I was really grateful that I did get picked up that day, but I knew when I got to jail that, as soon as what was in my system wore off, that I was in for a world of suffering. And the bed for treatment did come right away. I was in jail for quite a long time, and I suffered literally the entire time. And I finally got out, went to residential treatment, and the doctors were telling me, the courts wanted me to be on Vivitrol. The doctors told me that I needed to be on buprenorphine. So I studied I did my homework, and I checked all the facts about everything. And my ability to return to feeling normal was really what was missing in my life. I could not go a minute or a day without crying. Literally, my emotions were so all over the place. And, and the challenge was for me to get my message across to the judge and people in treatment that this is the right course of recovery or path for recovery for myself. And the stigma and the taboo that surrounds medication assisted treatment in the courts is challenging, to say the least. And I find myself facing the courts, going back and forth, trying to advocate for myself, when at the same time I'm being accused of manipulation and wanting to get high, which was not the case. I just wanted to feel better, and I wanted recovery. And finally, the judge, through only, just barely being able to advocate for myself in the courtroom, without busting out into tears, it was so difficult. I finally was able to convince the judge to get the help that I needed. And that was when my recovery really took hold. I finally was able to feel comfortable in my skin enough to start attending 12-step meetings. I was able to, start working on my recovery from a place in my mind that I was just secure and comfortable being who I was again. And, like, only through that help and the process of treatment and 12-step fellowships all combined, and, really getting plugged into housing, I was cherry picked for opportunities to work from the treatment facility where I was at. And, this is an opportunity that's afforded to everyone. Luckily, I was one of the people that was chosen. I can't say that everyone, was chosen. Out of 60 people, only 6 of us were able to leave in a work release program from that facility. And, luckily I was one of the people that was able to do that. And, all these things combined really, really like built the foundation for a life in recovery that I have today. And, now I have to take my exam for my peer certification, and I just got hired at a treatment facility here in Florida. And, my recovery is my life. And I'm so blessed to be able to be here today. And, one of the things I wanted to address with those that are listening is, what can we do to change some of the policies that are in place that, that really, I don't, there's taboo and all this mystery around medication assisted treatment, and what can we do to address the policies so that people can get the help they need? And, what are some of the inequities that are involved with treatment and criminal justice systems that need to be, addressed? And yeah, Brandy, you might want to chime in on that. Sorry, thank you.
Thanks, Emil. And being honest, Emil actually teed me up for this question, and I actually wrote it down because I want to dissect it a little bit. So just quickly, Brandy Izquierdo, like Stephen mentioned, I'm the executive director for Safe Project, but more importantly, I'm a person in long-term recovery from substance use, mental illness, as well as justice involvement. And my experiences are a tad bit different, perhaps not, in terms of being a woman in the criminal justice world, which we experience a couple different things probably. And just from my experience, Emil, thank you for sharing everything that you shared and being vulnerable about that. A lot of the trauma that you've had. I think quite often we don't talk enough about that piece. Everybody always wants to hear our story of addiction, but no one wants to hear our story before the story. And it's not like this is a career move for us. It's not like we wake up one day and say, you know what? I'm going to go this addiction route. It's going to make me a lot of money. This is the way to go. It doesn't work like that. And even for my own experience, it was the lock up. And I think, when we're talking in terms of policy, we have to think of the different entry points when we're really scanning policy in general, whether it be through the criminal justice system, the treatment service provider system. One of the areas that I was missed on was the domestic violence system and child protective services systems. Again, the addiction for me just progressed over time. So there were touch points in domestic violence, in that particular unit where I was never even asked what happened to you or how can we help you? It was really just, a progression of the addiction. And then you look at it from when you have children and you have domestic violence issues, quite often, child protective services, foster care, social services, all of these different avenues come into play. And I just also want to highlight before I answer your question, Emil, is that we need to start looking at policy, not just in terms of the drug use, drug possession, intent to distribute, things of that sort, but the indirect charges that are associated with substance use disorder as well. My first charges were not actually drug related charges. They were other charges, but the indirect charges were part of my addiction cycle. So, if you look at my history, which we like to call a rap sheet, right? And you look at that and this book, a lot of it, you don't see initially the drug charges. You see a lot of stupid little things happening, and it slowly progresses over time to the point that I was, I guess, privileged to meet DEA on their terms, not mine. Still don't know who the hell they are. I've probably worked with them at this point in my career, but you'll never know because they come fully masked, rifles, assault weapon, the weapons in hand and all of that. But to answer your question, and I'm going to repeat the question again, it's why don't we change policies that we know aren't supporting positive outcomes for justice involved persons, for policies we know will improve outcomes for my peers as well as our communities and ensure that they are created equitably serving the populations they are created for. So I'm going to pull out a couple pieces, and then from there, I'm going to pass it over to Daryl, because him and I are really good friends, and we talk about equity in the system. But just to break it down, why don't we change policies that we know aren't supporting, right? The answer to that question is because we know they aren't supporting, but they don't know they're not supporting. So that's a huge issue. Again, there's not a lot of education. There can be federal mandates, there can be state mandates, jurisdictional mandates in terms of medication assisted treatment, which they like to call versus non-medication assisted treatment. Why don't we throw that versus out the door, because it's not a versus issue. And just to put it out there, I am a person that personally has a path of non-medication assisted treatment, but I have a ton of friends who utilize the medication assisted pathway. So it's not us or them. It's all inclusive, right? Then you're talking about why don't we change policies that we know aren't supporting positive outcomes? Well, I just did a webinar earlier today. The problem is we don't focus on outcomes in policy. We focus on outputs, but we like to put the word outcome in policy. Outcomes are actually long-term impacts, which means we have to dig a little deeper, collect a little bit more, ask a few more questions, right? We need to reinvent and revamp the entire system to really collect outcomes. What we prefer to collect are outputs. How many people do you serve? Did they have successful treatment episodes? 180 days. Did they have a good completion rate? Were they compliant? Things like that. Or if we dissect in your position, Emil, drug courts, for example, we have antiquated policies. In order for an individual to graduate, they need to be clean and sober for X amount of months. Well, we're already putting negative connotations on that because we're saying that you were required to be clean, which really implies Narcotics Anonymous, or you have to be sober. So we're implying Alcoholics Anonymous, right? On top of that, you are mandated to get a home group and a sponsor. Not a court's business to know if you have a home group or a sponsor, because again, that's a 12-step fellowship. So we are not giving anyone the opportunity to explore other options in terms of recovery. It's forced recovery, and it needs to change. Communities, that's another part of your question. I'm just pulling this word out, communities. Why aren't we doing something different in terms of policy? Well, fear and politics. There's a fear within the community, and politicians don't get voted back in. The problem is a lot of individuals in recovery actually are voters. Imagine that. We vote, and we will vote you out. Equity. Let's talk about equity real quick, because Daryl and I, I'm going to tee this up for him in a minute. One of the things about equity that we tend not to talk about is that we cream in treatment service provider settings. And when I say cream, it's just what I'm saying. We pick the cream of the crop. We pick the cream of the crop that we know they're going to do great. We know they're going to do great because this is our perception, and we need these numbers. Why do we need these numbers? We need these numbers because these numbers are attached to our funding. So if we don't have good numbers, outcomes, which are actually outputs, we're in a bad position. So let's pick the cream of the crop to make sure that they can get in and they can get well, and then we can move on and serve others. The problem is we're not creating an environment or a community of sustainability at all. We are missing an entire population. And Daryl, I know you can talk about this more. We are missing Black and brown and marginalized communities. Do you want to know why? Because we are not allowing individuals to have proper recovery services, because we will say you can only serve nonviolent offenders, not violent offenders. You cannot serve individuals who have sex offenses. You cannot serve individuals who have drug sales, manufacture of control of substances, simple assault, aggravated assault. These are all indirect results of substance use disorder. As a person in recovery who had to protect my child in domestic violence, if you would have looked at my record before I had it shielded, it showed an assault charge because I was protecting my child from the abuser. I got wrapped up into a court system, and we know Black and brown communities get wrapped up into court systems all the time. We know the charges are trumped up on a consistent basis because we want to make sure one or two stick. That's the problem with policy. We are not equitable in what we do. We throw around the word equity on a consistent basis, but what we do is we leave people behind. Take a look at the prison system, the SIM model, sequential intercept model, beautiful model. It's a great structure to say that we're doing well, but guess what? If you really take a look at the SIM model, we're missing an entire population, and that's our prison population. Mass incarceration is exponential rates for Black and brown people, and yet they are still stuck in that system. There's no backward mapping when we're talking about second chance or reinvestment acts in terms of justice. There's no back sentencing where we're releasing people. We're going to move forward, and we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about exclusion. But what we don't do is look at our antiquated systems and our antiquated policies and talk about exclusion. Exclusion. We need to actually take a look at our policies and say, hey, who are we excluding? And we need to change it. And with that, I'm going to pass the torch over to Daryl.
Man, wow. And first of all, email, man, appreciate you, love you, brother. Thank you for setting this off. And I was enjoying the clap. I was enjoying the chat box. I forgot that we was even on the live. I was reading it, seeing what's going on in the chat box. I was like, man, this is good. And then, of course, Brandy was bringing that heat. But, we're not going to play no games. We're going to talk about Recovery Live. I see a lot of advocates. I see a lot of people in recovery in the room, and I appreciate you, love you. But understand, we got to be clear about this. Let's not hold no punches. When we on this, when we here, we bringing it real. We're bringing heat, right? So first of all, 1 in 3 Black males off the rip are going to spend time in prison. The data already shows that. When Emil said that, if he got one more dirty urine, he would go to treatment. And I was like, man, I never had that opportunity. I was automatically, the treatment that I received it inside prison. I am a survivor of mass incarceration. I was a person that every time I got arrested, it did not matter. I went to prison. There was no treatment in the conversation. And then when I got on this side of the track and I got into recovery and I started going into programs and I started doing H&I work, I started to look around the treatment facilities and I noticed that I was the only Black person in the room, the speaker, because everybody else was white males in these recovery programs. And I started to talk about my history of incarceration, and they would tell me that they've had 90 programs and never been incarcerated. And the only thing that was different, it wasn't different. We didn't use different drugs. Some of us come from the same economic backgrounds, but the difference was the color of our skin. So come on, man, let's not play no games. If y'all came here today, man, let's talk about this. Let's be real about this, because we need to be, when we talk about, it's interesting, the word policy is being thrown around, right? We got to understand that that's kind of the wolf in sheep's clothing, because they write stuff in policy and say, well, the policy said, because I'm watching Black and brown people being shot, and they said, well, there was no violation of the policy. Well, then we need to revisit the policy then, if that's okay. If you see nothing wrong with this video, then we need to revisit the policy. And I'm going to close because I want us to really get into this, but I want y'all to think about the brother George that lost his life, right? Think about this, because I know some of you use heroin or former heroin users that are on the call. And those of you that have had experience with the criminal justice system, I did not see somebody breaking the law. What I saw was a man scared to detox and lock up. Now let's talk about, that was a guy scared to detox and lock up, because at the end of the day, he only passed a fake $20 bill. He didn't deserve to die on the road like an animal. So we need to call it for what it is, man. We need to really recognize, because anybody in recovery today that represents recovery should be speaking upset and be like, listen, we need to change policy right now. We watched one of ours Ours, meaning black and white, those of us that are in recovery, we watch somebody die that is our family, meaning our recovery family. So we need to look at every policy across the board and start changing everything, because we can't let another George die in the street because they lack knowledge about recovery and treatment. Come on, man, let's go, Stephen. What we doing, baby?
Daryl, I can hardly talk when I listen to you, and I get angry, and I get righteously indignant, and I demand change, and often I feel hopeless and helpless because it's so often outside the locus of my control. And it's why that this group is together. It's why what you're saying is important, not just for the ears that help frame this and put it together, but for all the people who are listening, and for the others who will come later and see this event on YouTube, or have it shared with them somehow. It's getting our voices out there in a group size large enough, as Randy pointed out earlier. We vote. And trust me when I tell you, folks in recovery, we're very, very serious about voting. It's important to us. And for many of us with justice backgrounds, that's a privilege, a right that has been stripped from us, right? And so to get that back means a lot to us. So I'm with you, Daryl, Brandy, Emil, anything that we can do to get those messages out to the folks that can make the changes, we must do.
No doubt, no doubt. Just keep it in mind, man, real quick. It's 26 million people in recovery right now. It's 26 million. We 26 million deep. It's 65 million of us have criminal records. So listen, understand that we got the power. We just got to come together and empower people. And each and every one of you that's on this call has the power to empower people. Even if you've never used a drug in your life, but you work with people who do, you need to give them and show them how to use their voice in a place of power. Let's go, man. Let's get it.
Amen, brother. Brandy, let me turn to you with that same question. And I know that there's a lot here that that folks are waiting to just spill out. But from your perspective, the most important thing you want to share today that you think people need to hear.
I wrote something down, but I've already made that point. For me, the most important thing that I really need people to understand is the prison population, especially long-term and lifetime sentencers, are forgotten. They are forgotten, and they are mothers and brothers and sisters and fathers. And if we don't think that they parent from the inside, we're absolutely mistaken. It's a subculture within a culture. And I posed this question the other day to some of the higher ranks, of what about the prison population? Everything is great and real pretty. We can really brush it up. Well, we're working on the criminal justice population. Okay, question that. What parts are you working on? Well, we're doing a really great job on crisis intervention. Okay, that's people that are out still, right? Or we're really doing a great job on reentry. So this again are people that you think are going to do a great job in the community. And here we go. Let's start that creaming process. But what about the people in the middle? What about the people in the middle? What about those guys that are going to die in prison, but yet still deserve humanity, still deserve life? I tell you right now, and I mean, half the people on this call probably know, yeah, of course we use inside. It's inevitable. It happens. A lot of times, not even by the people that are in the prisons, but the ones that are overseeing the prisons, allegedly. But the reality is we forget that population. And why do we forget that population? Daryl, why do we forget that population?
And black and brown, and
black and brown.
We already know, man, that this prison system is built on systemic racism and white supremacy, right? So therefore, we're just throwing people away. And we want to make sure that we make that clear today, because as this is a movement. This is not a moment. We need to be really, really looking at this whole system recovery system, criminal justice system from a racial equity lens, and then we want to empower leadership. So not only are you just sitting at the table, your voice is being heard. What you're looking at is leadership here. This isn't a game. We're not playing no games. We're not telling you to be this little happy that you got a job. We want you to be a disruptor. We want you to be in there saying, listen, this needs to change today.
Just to highlight some of the things you're talking about, Daryl, just
Let's go,
in
baby.
my experience, sitting in the bullpen in drug court, whenever I was in Orange watching people come into the program, I consistently saw Black and brown people denied for the program due to, severity of charges with points or just whatever merits they give you this whatever, screening process. And there was always maybe one token Black person in the program, but every time I seen multiple times, they would get consistently denied services, for whatever reason. And I know that I've seen the judge or the prosecutor make exceptions for many people based on whatever merit they thought, deemed worthy. But never have I seen that exception made for other people, Black and brown.
Right,
Well,
right.
And another area we never talk about is, there are truancy courts out there. There are also juvenile justice courts out there, drug courts, right? So we just wait and wait and wait and wait until it gets to a point where we think there's no return, instead of hitting that head on. And really understanding, Emil, like you had just mentioned, there was a lot of stuff that happened to you prior to getting to this point.
Right.
Why are we not utilizing our recovery expertise, not just in our recovery bubble to be the after effect, the cleanup? Why are we not in the schools? Why are we not having these conversations with youth and young adult on a consistent basis? You want to know why? Fear. Oh, they're going to glorify the use, and there's nothing glorifying about it. It was an awful life I lived, but it's a reality, and I can tell you how I got on that path in hopes that you won't do the same thing, because I can see signs way before treatment service providers can see symptoms.
Right.
And a lot of the youth and young adult.
Right. Come on, Brandy. Let's keep this heat going, man, because understand something. 1 in 9 children who have a parent incarcerated are destined to be locked up as well. So we got to already understand that kids are going to this is the path. This is a cycle. We need to disrupt things. But if I can say one thing, Stephen, one thing that I want everybody to understand is that 95%, hear what I'm saying, 95% of the people that are locked up are coming home. How do we want them to come home? Right? They said this is a correctional system, then we need to make sure that they are doing their job, because the recidivism rate nationwide is 70%. Name one business that you could fail at 70% and still stay open. So we got to understand that it is our duty, whether you run a program, whether you're a recovery coach, whatever you are, you need to be working with these individuals and saying, it's my job to help you stay out. It's mine, because the system is already set up for you to go back. They got a system already set up for you to recycle back in. It's my job, your job, to help people stay out. And how do we do that?
I can speak on my experience, Daryl, as the most recently incarcerated person here. Programs are non-existent inside the walls. Even while I was waiting on treatment, the recovery process never even started until after I left the doors of the jail. Literally, 12-step meetings were few and far between for H&I. And, there's nothing but misery in the behind the walls. And there's no recovery. Recovery is not even a thought in their minds.
Right, and that's one. I'm just going to say that's the thing that we need to be talking about, and from the gate. If nothing else, you take from this call today, remember, re-entry starts at the beginning of the sentence, not the end. So you know what? So many systems are saying, "Oh, we'll see you 60 days before you get released." We'll see. No, we need to be doing re-entry programs from the beginning. So those of you that run programs need to be saying, we need to talk to these people soon as they're sentenced, not at the end. You are doing a disservice meeting people 60 days out because so many brothers fall through the cracks. Sorry, Brandy. They got me excited, man.
No, but no, just going back to Emil's point about H&I, hospitals and institutions, even if you do have 12-step within your community, you want to know why that they're not in those jails and prisons? Policy. Because a lot of times individuals who actually have criminal history or criminal records, or they've been incarcerated in that same area, they are not allowed to go back in the prison.
Right.
So again, revamping that policy. I mean, it all, because again, that's a shield. Oh, well, it's policy. This is policy. Well,
Right.
humans make policy. And we can tell you right now, I mean, I think you have all seen it from COVID hitting, policy can change. Like
Right. It's a word that people don't even challenge. They'll be like, oh, it's policy. I wish I could say that to my kids. It's policy. You can't go outside because it's policy. It's policy, right? I'm not going to do that because it's policy, you know?
You guys, so one of the things, as I'm listening to you, just as a justice involved person, part of me's in here cheering, right? But there's a part of me that is really bummed out. And it's because I know that what I can bring to my brothers and sisters behind the walls is hugely valuable, and that I could make an impact in ways that no CO, no counselor, nobody that I have ever engaged with in the criminal justice system, in the jail or in the penitentiary, has ever been able to connect and support me the way that I know I can support my brothers and sisters who are down. And the biggest challenge for me to do that is that because I have a felony conviction, I can't get inside.
Right.
And when we talk about policy changes and we talk about, trying to actually bring some real reform, real support to reentry, to recovery behind the walls, if you are blocking us in the most important evidence-based piece that we have, peer support, then what does that say about the system and our belief that our brothers and sisters can recover? So Daryl, let me turn to you.
I love that part that you said. I'm just reading, man. This chat box got me going, man. We got to
That's
make
awesome.
sure we keep that, man. We talk about forensic peer support a lot, right? We talk about training people who have made the transition, right? And this is something that C4 is going to be doing more and more of. We're going to talk more about it. Make sure you reach out to us about it. It's forensic peer support. So taking those that have made a transition, successful transition, like email, like myself, like Brandy, Steven, and those of us that are on this call, right? And training them on how to work with individuals, not only on the inside, but the outside, so that successful transition, so we can talk about the employment. Because what good is it to get employed if you don't know how to budget your money the right way? You can't take $400 and flip it no more. You got to take this $400 and budget it like you budgeted your commissary. But see, these are plain conversations that you cannot do clinically. These are conversations that have to be done through lived experience. Listen, this is what I did. This is what my experience has been. Let me tell you, oh, you want to go sell drugs? Well, let me tell you how that's going to play out. See, a lot of times, and nothing against my friends that are clinicians, I'm talking about people with lived experience. I can have a conversation. Stephen can have a conversation. People with lived experience can have a conversation with these individuals that are returning, that are overwhelmed, that don't understand what's going on, and say, listen, let me tell you how this is going to play out, right? Because see, I make no mistake. I've been home almost over 10 years now. And I got, like Steven said, a lot of letters behind my name. But if I were to get arrested today, they would call me 183422, and they wouldn't talk about the recovery live. They would talk about my last arrest. So we got to be clear on, when we're educating people and policymakers, how important it is to make change. And someone was just talking about policy. We're working on a clean slate bill here in Connecticut right now. We're trying to eliminate the criminal record so it's no longer a barrier. And I say that each and every one of us that do this work should be looking at that as well.
Yes. All right, gang. I got about 10 minutes for some Q&A, and there are a couple of really good ones.
Man, that chat box on fire, man. You might need an extinguisher.
That thing has been blazing hot. So this first one is for Emil. Emil, do you feel like there was anything that could have been done to help people who are in the addiction cycle to advocate for their own recovery process. And I think that arose because of the success you had in your advocacy effort.
Absolutely. And this is something that I really is important because regarding what I mentioned earlier about the military sexual trauma, especially in the military, just as something I'm familiar with, because of the stigma and the shame associated with it, this is something that they try so hard to keep under the rug and keep squashed down. They don't want people to talk about it. So they had to come up with an anonymous way to bring, to be able to, bring yourself to advocate for yourself so that you could get the help that you needed without people judging you. And back when I was in the military, they had a don't ask, don't tell policy. So any of that could be perceived as, whatever, and then immediately you could be even discharged for it. But yeah, so what they came up with is outside treatment that you can report to, where you don't have to, face the shame and the stigma, and you can report even anonymously, so that you can get the help you need without having to look someone in the eye that you feel might be judging you. And I know this even goes, Brandon, I had this conversation about pharmacies and just the shame and stigma that I feel when even at the VA, when I go to pick up my medicine, to this very day, I feel stigmatized by these people because they just don't know how to talk to a person in recovery or a person with mental health, and that's what you're getting at, Candace. I totally, I feel your question. Go ahead, Daryl.
No. I'm fixing my house up, bro.
I thought you were raising your hand.
Lights
all
are
right, next
falling
question,
down and
Steve.
stuff, bro. Almost got hit in the head with some stuff. Nah, I'm good. My bad.
All right, no worries. And Emil, thank you for that. So this is just something that I think somebody that really is curious about getting a contacts from all of you. If you guys can, if you're amenable and you can post your contact information in the chat, I think there's a lot of folks who would really like that.
Absolutely.
Somebody else asked, where and how can I help? Because I love good trouble. And so that piece, I think, if we've got any recommendations, just as some general ways to be able to get your voice heard, to do something that makes you feel like, you're contributing. If we've got ideas, let's just drop them in the chat. There's another one for everybody with respect to the transition process and employment. What is the biggest barrier to getting a job, and what was most helpful in overcoming it? And so let me turn to Emil for that, because I know that just happened for you. And then we'll check in with Brandy and Daryl.
Yeah, I've literally just been going through this process, and the biggest barrier, luckily for me, I was able to, when I completed drug court and I was successful, the judge was able to remove the felony charges from my record because, and not to say anything against them, I love the treatment program, but they cherry pick, like I mentioned earlier, and I was successful, so they were able to help me. But, I just, I feel bad for the people that weren't given that opportunity to be in my position, even to get this far. But yeah, the biggest obstacle, not only the criminal background check, because luckily I had, had help with that, but I'll tell you this quick story. As I was getting interviewed recently, the case manager that was interviewing me with the director asked me about my clean time, and said that the date that I mentioned didn't match what was on my resume because I was in recovery since October 2018, but I didn't get this right away. I ended up relapsing several times. That wasn't because I wasn't in recovery. I just, I didn't get this the first time. March 26, 2019 was my actual clean day. And so she brought that up to try and catch me in a lie. I mean, that really got me some type of way. Also, the next biggest obstacle is the pay. We're not facing equal pay at all. I had to turn down 3 jobs because I couldn't make a livable wage from what they were trying to pay me as a peer supporter. So
Steven, I got to jump in real quick.
Absolutely.
I'll jump in real quick. Just
go for it.
Popping off of that. Pay is a huge issue. I'm a huge advocate for obviously individuals in recovery in all aspects, but also the peer workforce. Our pay is crap. I will tell you that right now. For the compromising positions that the peer workforce is put in, the pay is nothing. And then you're caught between a rock and a hard place because 9 times out of 10, if you are working in a community where you're accessing the services, you have to disconnect from those services because you can't use the services because you now work for the services. So we are holding people down left and right from pay. The next thing I want to talk about are HR policies. There's a huge issue in terms of HR policy when you're talking about felonies, misdemeanors, anything involving criminal justice history. And that's because we really miss educating HR in terms of asking the right questions, gaps in employment. I had an individual who was actually getting, and Daryl, I appreciate you bringing up that 95% of people are going to be your neighbors out of the criminal justice system. I'm one of them. Hello, how you doing? And I cut my grass. But the reality here is I actually had an individual, it took me 4 years behind Eastern Correctional Institution to actually train individuals with life sentences. One of them was up and was able to get out. Oh my goodness, it was a miracle. It was wonderful. I was so excited. This individual was prepped and ready to go for the workforce, but of course the workforce and peer support because they're a little more forgiving, right? Hell no. So I'll tell you right now, one of the health departments called me and I'm as a reference and I'm talking to this individual. They're like, well, how does this person deal with supervisors? I'm like, I don't know if you know or not, but he's been in prison for quite a long time. He doesn't have any work history and he sure as hell has never dealt with supervisors. I said, I can give it to you from a perspective of a CO and how he interacts with them, but you need to change your question. Because the way you're asking these questions is for your traditional person who's out there in the community. You haven't revamped yourself or your knowledge, and you work for a health department. I mean, it blew my mind. So the reality is we need to take a look at the human resources. This is one of the other reasons that a lot of individuals who have federal or state charges and backgrounds don't get hired as peers. We get them all the way to this point, and then you have to do a background check and you're not going to get in, you know, based on some of the charges or what have you. So between the pay and the HR policies, we have a hell of a time. So honestly, you need other people in your circle that are going to raise holy hell. Make sure you pick references that are going to speak up and speak out and push back. And make sure that you condition everyone around you about how you need that support in finding help. And let's not even talk about pardons and Commonwealth states, because it's very rare. I mean, you're trumped up on charges that for another state may be a misdemeanor. The only way you can get around it is a governor's pardon. Anyway, I'm done. Thanks for letting me share. Daryl, go. It's your turn.
Whoo, this was a lot, man. This is a lot. Man, you got to get these things 2 hours, man, so we can really give people stuff to chew on. But just to say that, you know, I just wanted to say to anybody that works with individuals coming home, to really appreciate the fact that understanding the data and the statistics and the challenges that it is for an individual that has a criminal record, and understanding that a white male with a criminal record has a 13% chance of getting a job with a criminal record versus a black male with no record. So we already understand that these disparities are there. Why do I tell you that? Is because I don't care if you're white, black, orange, I don't care where you come from, but when you're working with these populations, especially disenfranchised people, you need to know these statistics so you can be real with your people. You can really tell them these are the challenges you're going to face. So when I put you out there, I got to make you look the best that you can, because you already got one strike against you, and that's your color. The next strike is your record. So I don't care what color you are working with these people, but I don't want you to be misinformed working with individuals. That's the biggest thing that you can do. Do your homework, check with us at C4. You want to learn how to talk to this more about people coming home. We got you, man. Let us show you the way so you can really be an asset to the individual so they could go home and be a tax-paying citizen and a family member and so on and so forth. Until we get to that point, because you don't know what you don't know, and that's nothing against you, but let someone show you the way.
Beautifully stated. So on that, because this is such a perfect dovetail, what are your thoughts? And there's about 5 questions that I really need responses to, and we don't have enough time. So
there's one in the Q&A, man. A Q&A one is a real good one, but I think that's a presentation in itself.
I am totally with you. But so here's the question I think is really important. What are you guys' thoughts about credentialing individuals as peer specialists while they're down and they are locked up? And I know that there have been a couple of programs that have done that, but what is being asked is, if they do get credentialed and they're released into the community, what environment should they be employed? Back in the prison or in the community? How does that work? So I'm just throwing it to both of you.
Just real quick, man, you know what? I like it, but what are you credentialing them for? Because you cannot credential somebody to help somebody transition who has not transitioned. Connecticut made a huge mistake with having mentors try to tell people how to live outside who have not been outside in 20 years. So it's difficult. So these people actually failed because they didn't have the skill set. So we're teaching, like, credential somebody to show you how to work the system on the inside. And then when you get out, they need another level of credentialing. See, these are specialist levels, right? So then you need a level on how to transition. You could be an expert on how to navigate system or programs to take, what to do for parole, how to do this. You could be an expert at that. But then you got to get out here and understand what it's like to work out here in this system and what it's like and what the challenges are.
It's a warm.
We should teach them how to live first, right?
Yeah, you can't tell me how to live. You ain't live. I don't listen to what Brady said about cutting grass. How come you gonna learn to cut the grass if the guy ain't got no grass?
It's a warm handoff environment. So the reality is, you don't just credential people and leave them. I mean, you have to have individuals inside the prison systems who are consistently doing this work, and then once you continue to expand that inside, like Daryl said, you also have to have a warm handoff. So those peers on the inside who are still incarcerated citizens actually would have access to peers on the outside who are those transition peers, and then your community-based peers moving forward. It's an entire trajectory or a continuum of care in terms of recovery. Right. So, it's not one or the other, and it's really all about preference and lived experience and where that person wants to be employed to, how well they're going to do in those aspects. But I tell you, having the individuals inside doing that work creates a subculture of engagement that is monumental. And then having them actually connecting. I mean, we have pen pal services and all of that. There's no reason that peers on the outside can't be connected to peers on the inside and saying, hey, I have a dude getting ready to go over to the annex. Can you start hooking up with him, or can we do a warm handoff? We do it in the ERs. Why can't we do it in the prison systems?
Right. Setting people up for failure if we don't do it the right way. This is a bridge, man. This is a community thing, man. We got to do this. Sometimes you only get one shot at this thing.
Right. You guys, listen. So this is the worst part of this whole job that I have as a moderator, and that's bringing this thing to an end, because this is the kind of real discussion and conversation that Recovery Live was designed to bring out. That's why Recovery Live exists. And what we got today with Daryl, Brandy, and Emil, and I certainly want to say a gigantic thank you and a humble gratefulness just to be associated with my brothers and sisters who are so passionate and powerful around recovery and supporting our brothers and sisters who are still down or who are trying desperately to come back. And it almost brings me to tears, because I've been there and I was really alone. And folks are not alone anymore, even though sometimes it feels that way. We are out here and we are fighting like hell for you and for us, and we'll continue that fight. So I just again want to thank all our speakers. It was an amazing discussion again, and I want to thank all of you who came and joined us today. Please know that, we'll be sending this deck will be available to everybody, and the recording, not the deck. And it'll go out to anybody who was registered. We're also hoping that you'll come and join us for our May Recovery Live event. And before you guys all run off to the rest of your workday, there's going to be a link that'll pop up. It's a satisfaction survey. Please take a couple minutes to complete that. We really need your feedback, especially on this presentation today. They're important to us because it shapes how we bring Recovery Live to you. So with that, watch for that survey. Have a fantastic Thursday. Stay safe, folks, and come back and see us in May. Thank you.
Fill out that survey. Fill out that survey. Let's go.